1985's Back to the Future is a film beloved by both audiences and critics alike. A heartwarming classic that has entertained us all for generations. It's a film that probably couldn't be made in the modern age due to the current hang-ups, unwritten rules, and general lack of talent in Hollywood. But for students of good writing, Back to the Future is a masterfully crafted script. Let's take a look and see what makes the story tick. Hi everyone, welcome back to Vivifier. In today's video we're going to be examining some of the writing techniques used in Back to the Future and look into how you can use them in your own creative projects. There are many things to praise in this film. The way it handles exposition,
Einstein's clock is exactly 1 minute behind mine and still ticking!
The brilliant build-up of tension in the finale, and of course, the brilliant way it delivers its love theme. But today we're going to use Back to the Future as a shining example of one of the most simple and commonly used writing techniques: setup and payoff. We'll highlight a couple of basic examples first so you can get the feel, and then progress from there to two more, one technical plot related one, and one emotional, character-driven one. I also teased in the title that this film is almost a perfect movie. So stick around to the end to see what I think could have been improved.
Oh, yes, sir.
Why are things so heavy in the future? Is there a problem with the Earth's gravitational pull?
Setup and payoff works in the following way. First, you prepare the audience with the setup.
Kids, we're gonna have to eat this cake by ourselves. Your Uncle Joey didn't make parole again.
And then later in the story, you call back to it and pay it off.
So you're my Uncle Joey. Better get used to these bars, kid.
Simple enough, right? It works particularly well for comedy as it forms the structure of almost all classical jokes, but it can be deployed in many other ways as well. The Jailbird Joey setup is mainly in the script for the purpose of comedy, but because the film is excellently written, it serves another role as well. The line is placed in the middle of a bigger scene highlighting the McFly family's troubles. It doesn't necessarily need to be in the film, but in addition to setting up a comedy beat in the future, or, well, the past, it is also able to help flesh out the present world that our characters live in. It gives Lorraine another thing to feel defeated over, and it feeds into the nothing is going right for us vibe in the household, which in turn feeds Marty's ambition to make something out of his life. The scene accomplishes many things at once, and it does so in less than 30 seconds of screen time. This is efficient storytelling. The alternative would be to have a character actually tell a story about Uncle Joey through dialogue. Why he's in jail, why it matters to them, and how they wish things could be a different way instead. But this would be clumsy, distracting, and basically irrelevant. There would be no point in having it in the film, and it'd be much harder to make it funny. Instead, having it in as a nice little 1-2 punch adds a helpful dose of lightness and context to the film, strengthening the tone and telling us more about the world.
He cries whenever we take him out, so we just leave him in there all the time.
A different small example of setup and payoff is in the change of the shopping mall's name when Marty comes back to the future. At the start of the film, Doc asks Marty to meet him at Twin Pines Mall to aid him in his time travel experiment. But when Marty time travels back to 1955 and arrives at Twin Pines Ranch, the mall's presumable namesake, he inadvertently destroys one of the Twin Pines while fleeing from the shotgun-toting farmer. Later, when Marty returns to 1985, we can see that the sign has changed to say Lone Pine Mall. This is a detail so small that it is almost at Easter egg level, but it again adds value to the film. It not only adds an amusing reward for viewers who have been paying attention, but it also adds consequence and foreshadows the effect that Marty has had on the present due to his time travel adventure.
Anything you do could have serious repercussions on future events. Do you understand?
Yeah.
Okay, now on to a bigger example, the clock tower. The clock tower is first set up in a comedy beat and part of a recurring gag where Marty and Jennifer are constantly interrupted whenever they're about to kiss. But the scene delivers so much that it is vital for the rest of the film. Let's have a look.
Save the clock tower! Save the clock tower! Mayor Wilson is sponsoring an initiative to replace that clock. 30 years ago, lightning struck that clock tower, and the clock hasn't run since. Thank you. Don't forget to take a flyer. Save the clock tower!
Where were we? Right about here.
Jennifer!
So this scene has just given us our comedy moment, it's provided justified exposition about the history of the clock tower, and has given Marty the key tool he needs for later on, the flyer that contains the information that Doc needs about the lightning bolt. The scene sets up the method by which Marty will return to 1985, but it also sets up his motivation to return. Remember, he first pulls the flyer out of his pocket when he is making an emotional appeal to the Doc to get him back to Jennifer.
Stuck here. I can't be stuck here. I got a life in 1985. I got a girl.
Is she pretty?
Oh, she's beautiful. Look what you wrote here, Doc. I mean, that says it all. Doc, you're my only hope.
The clock tower scene's main goal is to deliver a plot-based setup, but it still builds the characters at the same time. And as a nice little bonus, it also sets up the character of Goldie Wilson, who has a fun little role later on.
Man, Goldie Wilson. I like the sound of that.
This one scene is brilliant in how much it's able to achieve. It's an extraordinarily efficient setup as it is, with not a single line wasted, but what's really remarkable is how cleanly they're able to hide away all that story wiring under a scene that's just entertaining in its own right. It's expert stuff, and to be honest, the film is full of examples just like it. I just wanted to highlight this scene because if you take out these few minutes from the film, none of the rest of it makes sense. But you would never know this in a first viewing. It's really excellent stuff.
It's like Doc's
Yeah,
always
I
saying.
know. If you put your mind to it, you can accomplish anything.
Now we can move on to the character example. This would all technically be defined under character development, but to me it follows the same principles of setup and payoff, just on a longer time scale and with more layering and repetition. So I feel it's worth mentioning in this video, as you can see how far these principles can be taken if you practice them often enough. There are lots of really good character arcs in this story. Marty's desire to prove himself was a strong contender for the subject of this video, but I found myself more drawn to George's arc, as it really served as the beating heart of the film's emotional climax.
George, aren't you gonna kiss me?
I don't know.
George McFly is a loser. Even before we see him, we are told that he's a slacker, and that no McFly has ever amounted to anything in the history of Hill Valley. In his introduction scene, he is portrayed as a spineless pushover, frustrated, repressed, and hopelessly nerdy. Marty is disappointed in him as a father, Lorraine is disappointed in him as a partner, and George seems to know and struggle with all of this. We're shown him pushed around by Biff, setting up the conversation structure for payoff later, and then he tells us his problem very directly and very sorrowfully. It's clear from his confession that there's more to George as a man, and that he wishes he could be better. This sets up his character for a redemption arc.
Biff just happens to be my supervisor, and I'm afraid I'm just not very good at confrontations.
George's reintroduction in the later part of the story is particularly well done. Marty sits right next to him in the diner without knowing, and we, the audience, are none the wiser until Biff walks in and father and son share the same reflexive movement, cluing us in. We see the payoff to the earlier conversation as it follows the exact same structure and phrasing, and we as the audience realise, oh my god, this same thing has been happening for 30 years. It's a powerful payoff, as it shows us so much without needing to explicitly lay it all out in dialogue. Goldie Wilson makes his appearance next, paying off his setup from earlier and also giving George advice to stand tall and have some respect for himself, which George waves off. George struggles with his lack of confidence throughout the whole rest of the film, despite Marty's attempts to embolden him. Just like with Goldie, it seems he's heard all this advice before, but it clearly doesn't work coming from an outside source. He will need to discover his strength for himself. Marty gets a moment of connection with George later at school, when he realises his father writes sci-fi stories. And he gets a second, stronger connection straight after, when his earlier line,
What if they say, get out of here, kid? You got no future. I mean, I just don't think I can take that kind of rejection.
is paid off and mirrored by his father's same response.
Well, what if they didn't like them? What if they told me I was no good? I guess that would be pretty hard for somebody to understand. No. No, not hard at all.
This connection with our already likeable main character makes us want to root for George the underdog, despite some of his less savoury activities.
What was it, George? Bird watching?
What, Lorraine? What?
Ultimately, George's big character payoff serves as the film's main emotional climax. We have known from the outset that his fear of Biff is George's most intense personal barrier, but due to the events of the story, he is eventually thrust into a situation where his morals demand that he take a stand against him.
Hey, you, get your damn hands off. Oh.
However, strength and bravery don't just materialise out of nowhere. George is clearly terrified when he opens the car door and finds Biff instead of Marty, and even after he makes the difficult but necessary decision to stand up to Biff, he's still very frightened. His first attack is stiff and lacks intention, but when he's forced into a weakened position and he sees Lorraine helpless on the ground beside him, his courage is stirred and he finally finds his inner hero. Like everyone else, I absolutely love this scene. It's so real, the stakes are incredibly high, and the light touch that was present early in their film is gone, replaced by something so much darker. George needs to step up to the plate here, and he does, but you can feel how much strength of will it took for him to act after being repressed and bullied for so long. You can really feel the genuine connection and chemistry between him and Lorraine, and it makes perfect sense to the audience that the two of them would be bonded together forever after this. George takes on and conquers his biggest fear, but the film isn't actually done with him yet. It throws another smaller obstacle in the way, a test to see if he can stick to the new path and become the man he was always meant to be.
Excuse me.
George McFly has a great character arc, and it's beautifully set up throughout the whole course of the movie. But at the start of this video, I did say that there's one scene in Back to the Future that I didn't like, and it turns out it's part of George's arc. I'm talking, unfortunately, about this scene.
My name is Darth Vader. I am an extraterrestrial from the planet Vulcan.
Now, maybe dislike is too strong a word for this scene. I mean, I get it pays off George's nerdy sci-fi obsession. It gives Marty another reason to use the radiation suit, and it does provide a funny comedy element. It's definitely not bad, but I do think there was a missed opportunity here. The reason that Marty dons a suit is because George says the following.
Look, I'm just not ready to ask Lorraine out to the dance. And not you, nor anybody else on this planet is gonna make me change my mind.
Again, I get that George needs some extra impetus to ask Lorraine out. After all, the first meeting must have been embarrassing for him. But I do wish that his reasons for convincing himself were more due to his own feelings towards Lorraine specifically, rather than it all being pushed by Marty. During the 1955 portion of the film, we aren't really shown that George has any particular interest in Lorraine compared with other girls at the school. He clearly thinks she's pretty when Marty introduces them, but that's about all. He doesn't really know her outside of that. I get that it's high school and that he's an awkward guy, but it would be nice if there was a scene that established just a small connection between the two of them. That would help motivate him to work up just barely enough courage to ask Lorraine to the dance for himself. It would be a small step in the right direction for his character, and while you can make the argument that it would take away from the impact of his transformation later on, I do think that it would be a better setup for the future connection between George and Lorraine that could be paid off more strongly after he takes down Biff. I think the film still works great without this motivation from George, but I do think if they could have pulled it off in a scene, it would have made for a better resolution than I asked Lorraine out because Darth Vader said if I didn't, he would melt my brain. It would be good if the film gave him a reason to like and care for Lorraine, as well as dislike and fear Biff. What do you think? Am I a million miles off? Would adding this motivation for George distract from Marty's mission to get his parents back together? The screenwriters for this film definitely know their craft more than I do, but I do still feel like there was an opportunity here that they have uncharacteristically overlooked, despite my appreciation for Van Halen cassettes and Vulcan salutes. What would you change in the film if you could? And what lessons have you taken from Back to the Future from your own watch-throughs, whether from a writing point of view or even more generally? Let me know in the comments and feel free to skewer me for suggesting that there's any way to improve this wonderful story. Back to the Future is a film that I've enjoyed since childhood, and I'll always be grateful to the people involved for making it happen. It truly is an excellent work of art. But that's all I've got for today, folks. I hope you've been able to get some value or entertainment out of this video. If you did, please press the like button. It really helps out the new channel and adds to its growth. This is only my second video on YouTube, so I'm taking all the suggestions and feedback I can to try and make these videos as enjoyable as possible. Please let me know any suggestions that you have in the comments below, and please subscribe if you want to see more in the future. Thanks again. Hope to see you all again soon.